Time to take a look at what's grabbing headlines around the world. And for the International Press Review, I'm joined once again by Solange Mougin. Good morning, Solange.
Good morning.
You've been looking into how the press is covering the Winter Olympic Games in South Korea, but more specifically, the presence of 230 North Korean women who've been sent as their nation's cheerleaders.
Yeah, the South Korean press is all abuzz about the army of beauties. Now, these women they've been chosen because of their looks, okay, and because of their beauty by Kim Jong-un regime, and they're going to get possibly more attention at the Games, according to the Korean press, than the actual North Korean athletes. Now, they have to be at least 5'3". Most of them hail from prestigious universities, as the Korea Herald explains, and some of them have become stars in both of the Koreas. This is the first time in over a decade that they've left the country on an international mission.
So how these women are perceived in South Korea and abroad is the subject of a piece this morning in the New York Times.
Yeah, in an op-ed entitled "Lipstick Diplomacy," the Times examines how these women are proof of state-sponsored sexism. According to Suki Kim, who wrote the article, she said that the most shocking thing is how these women are portrayed in South Korea, that they represent purity, innocence, and therefore sex appeal. The sexism and propaganda mission of Kim Jong-un as Army of Beauties is also subject of an opinion piece in The New Yorker. It says essentially the same thing, and it also goes into how cheerleading is in itself a propaganda tool. And it goes into how women in the U.S., for example, weren't allowed to be cheerleaders until 1923. But since then, it's been sort of sexualized. The New Yorker says that the underlying idea that pretty women can be so distracting that they can dissipate nuclear war is so ridiculous that it's almost thrilling. That's according to the New Yorker.
Okay. Right. We're turning now to Syria and the capture of two jihadists that's making headlines in the UK.
Yeah, these are the final members of a group of British jihadists that were called the Beatles, because there were 4 of them. Now, they were captured by Syrian Kurds and handed over to U.S. forces. And if we take a look at the Eye, they chose this story for their front page this morning. But who are these British Beatles? Well, one of them became known as Jihadi John for beheading American and British hostages. He was killed in 2015. Another is in prison in Turkey. And the 2 others now are in U.S. custody, according to the New York Times, which broke the story. Now, the Times raises an interesting question about what authorities are going to do with these 2 men, who they're known for their brutality. They've been stripped of their British nationality, so that could create a problem because the UK doesn't necessarily have to take them back. U.S. forces, according to the Times, can't send them to Guantanamo because that would open a sort of whole can of worms judicially in the U.S., and the U.S. government wants to avoid that. So there is also the option of trying the men legally in the United States, but that would open, as in any case, the possibility of the men getting off.
Okay, so for now they're in limbo. But we're staying in Syria, and the U.S. and Arab press are talking a lot about this U.S.-led coalition airstrike on Syrian allied regime fighters, which killed around 100 troops.
Yeah, Voice of America, the U.S.-backed website and radio station, went with the opinion of Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis, who said the strike was in self-defense because Syrian forces were approaching a U.S. base. But in the Arab press, in Al-Arab, they say the motivation behind the attack was Washington sort of putting the regime and therefore Russia and Iran in their place, and that it was a U.S. move to control its interests and Syrian oil in the region. Now, the Washington Post says that regardless of why the attack happened, the mission in the U.S. is changing, that there is a case of mission creep. Now, that means that the original mission is changing forms in a war that is becoming increasingly complex and one that is splintering and becoming increasingly complicated.
Okay. Well, we are finishing on a lighter note, Solange, and that is that you found some potentially exciting scientific news.
Yeah, this could be a breakthrough for women who struggle to become pregnant. Now, both the Times and the Independent put this story on their front pages this morning. A group of researchers have found a way to grow women's human eggs in a lab. It took 30 years. It was a 30-year study, and it sounds freakishly sci-fi, and perhaps it is. But basically, what the scientists did is they took immature eggs and they grew them until they became mature ones. Now, what's cool about this is that women who have had cancer or who can't get pregnant through in vitro treatments or who are just older even, they could then have a shot at having a baby. Now, the study was published in Molecular Human Reproduction, and there is a warning in it, though. It says that the lab eggs haven't been tested to see if they can actually become embryos or real babies.
Okay.
And the scientists who ran the study said that it is a breakthrough and that you can't, quote, you can't make an omelette without breaking some eggs.
Indeed. Okay, Solange, thank you so much for that. Solange Moujan there with the International Press Review.